In case you've seen the short countdown, it's because I almost forgot to press record. It's how the sausage is being made. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 129 of the longest tenured Denver Nuggets spin-off podcast in the world. Welcome to the Denver Nuggets' Serbian Corner. My name is Miroslav, and before we begin, please let me remind you to like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the DNVR Sports YouTube channel and the DNVR Nuggets podcast channel. The audio version is perfect for your commute or to make your office/home office time more bearable. If you want to support the show more directly, you can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/MiroslavCuk, just like my Seco tier supporters Peter Plummer and Daniel Lynch. Let's recap the games from last week quickly. First, the Pelicans game, first blood. The Nuggets played this game without three of their best defenders, Aaron Gordon, Peyton Watson, and Russell Westbrook. Zeke Nagy was starting at the 4, and surprise, surprise, looked great next to Jokic. To be fair, he was excellent individually, guarding Zion Williamson, hitting a couple of threes, and even putting the ball on the court and dribbling through the traffic for a nice dunk. What helped also was the fact that the Pelicans were without Ingram, DeJounte Murray, and Herb Jones. Mike was great, scoring in bunches. Jamal was good. Julian was hitting everything but his threes off the bench. And Joker recorded his 12th triple-double versus the team from New Orleans. As my buddy D-Line put it eloquently, just a professional win versus a bad opponent. Next, the Pelicans game, First Blood, Part 2. The second Pelicans game had a weird start to it. Aaron Gordon returned to the lineup against the short-handed bottom dwellers. The Nuggets let the guest team enter the paint at will, but the offense was still humming. Both MPJ and Jokic had 21 points at the half, but Jokic had already had 8 3-point attempts at that point. Bizarre. The game was tied at 68. MPJ added 14 more in the third, and the Nuggets blew the game open, creating an 18-point lead. It's incredible what playing defense versus bad teams does for this team. In the end, Mike, Nikola, and Christian combined for 100 points, and both Mike and Nikola had 35-plus point double-doubles with 5 threes made, and were the first teammates in history of the NBA to do that in the same game, according to Jake Coyne, who was on this show last week. After that, we got the trade deadline, and Nuggets did nothing. Nada. Zilch, zero. Not even a minimum plus cash for another minimum. Nothing. After that, the Magic game. Just a great defensive performance from the Nuggets. Aaron Gordon returned to the lineup, but Jamal Murray joined Russell Westbrook and Peyton Watson in street clothes. Maybe Jamal's absence helped with the defense, but the team for sure played quicker on offense without him. Michael Porter thrived, 30 points in 30 minutes, the first player in Nuggets history with 3 straight games with 30 points and 5 threes made. Joker had a triple-double, and the Nuggets took the lead halftime through the second quarter and never looked back. A very good win versus Magic. Lastly, the Suns game. This game had a lot of guys missing. Russ and Peyton were still out, and MPJ joined them due to the groin tightness. On the other hand, the Suns injury report was Bradley Beal out with big toe inflammation. Grayson Allen had a knee problem, and Kevin Durant was out with being pissed for being made available for trades. Before this game, I called out Jamal Murray for not shooting enough threes, and he responded beautifully. He hit 3 consecutive quick threes to start the game, and overall had his best game of the season, in my humble opinion. 30 efficient points with 6 made threes. Christian Braun was amazing again. Strawther missed some, but also made some other shots. And Joker had a quiet 26, 11, and 9 night in 28 minutes. It was a blowout, but my main takeaway from this game is that the Suns are just not good. Losing Keita Bates-Diop really cost them, I guess. Okay, so you can already see, if you're watching this on YouTube, that I did my hair this morning. So I'm supposed to have my new hairstyle, new haircut game today. So I didn't want to make any improvisations. I needed to bring out some heavy artillery. My guest for today is a guy I used to listen to several times a week. Then I started reading his stuff at Bleacher Report. Then I started following him on Twitter, where he might be the best NBA person to follow. He's one of the very few national guys who was screaming about the greatness of Nikola Jokic way back in 2016. He is a lawyer in the Wild West, a former Soviet Socialist Republic of Wyoming. It's Andy Bailey.
Miroslav, how are you? That was a wonderful intro. Thank you.
Did you catch the reference about the former Soviet Socialist Republic of Wyoming?
I wasn't aware we used to be part of the USSR. I'd love to hear the explanation.
No, you weren't. But the idea behind it is because Rocky IV was filmed in Wyoming, and it was pretending to be Soviet Union.
So when he's doing the training montage in the snow, how did I not know that?
All that beautiful snow is Wyoming, man. So
I cannot believe I didn't know that. I feel like a failed Wyomingite right now.
I have this weird kind of fetish to know where some movies were made. For instance, The Cliffhanger, while it was made in Colorado, like it was supposed to be in Colorado, it has scenes in Denver at the airport and stuff like that. It was completely filmed in Italy. So it's interesting. The stuff.
So is your knowledge also specialized to Stallone movies? It sounds like.
Guilty as charged. I mentioned this on Twitter, I think a couple of weeks ago. Sylvester Stallone is not only the actor I've seen the most movies starring at, he is also the actor who wrote the most movies I watched in my movie watching career, because he basically wrote all of his movies where he appears in. So he is a big name of Hollywood, and I'm glad he's still doing movies. Yeah. Okay, so that was a short movie corner from the both of us, and let's start this show talking about the big guy, not the Stallone, but Jokic. So I'm doing this on purpose because I tend to forget to talk about Nikola, concentrating too much on the swing players on the Nuggets. This is the 5th season of him being an MVP frontrunner, and we'll get to the MVP race later. But before that, you're among the early adopters of his game. Is there any bold prediction about the second half of his peak that you would call outrageous at this point? Like
the second half of his peak, is that what you said?
Yeah. So going forward, like,
man, I don't know. I don't know how much more outrageous we can get than what he's already doing. I remember before the start of last season, so before the start of 23-24, I just sort of flippantly said, there's no way they'll give Jokic another MVP unless he does this. And I put out a stat line that I thought was unattainable, but it wasn't like totally bonkers. Like there was some shred of possibility that Jokic could do it. And then, of course, like he basically hit the exact numbers I put up as almost like a half joke for last season. And now he's up the ante again. I mean, he's averaging a 30-point triple-double basically at this point. I guess as far as predictions for this, the latter part of his peak, couple more championships. I think players of this level typically get more than one, and I think he's probably going to get there. We might get a guest appearance from my 3-year-old real quick. I don't know if you can hear him.
Yep.
Wally. What?
There we go. Hi, Wally.
You say hi.
Hi.
How are you?
He's doing okay. You want to go see Mom? She's downstairs.
Yeah.
Go see Mama, okay? Say bye, everybody.
Bye, Wally. This is top-notch podcasting. So last season, when the Nuggets went out in the second round to the Timberwolves, you could make a couple of theories why that happened. Even though they had a 20-point lead in the game 7, they still lost it. And the most prevailing theory is that just the starters got overplayed, especially in the last stretch of the season, and just ran out of gas. But another theory will also tell you that Joker was probably, because he was too tired, shooting too many threes, and he wasn't good at those in the playoffs, in the regular season too. And then he comes back after playing in the Olympics, by the way, and he's now just like one of the best 3-point shooters in the whole league.
It's crazy.
It's just unfair.
Yeah, that's long been, I wouldn't say it was like an obvious, clear weakness of his, but if you had to pick some aspect of his game, other than the defensive lapses that everybody loves to talk about, it was probably 3-point shooting would be the weakness that you'd pick. That's probably the only one you might be able to pick offensively. And now that's clearly not a weakness. He set about becoming a good 3-point shooter over the offseason, and that's exactly what he is now. I mean, there are truly no holes in his game offensively. And you could probably list on one hand the guys in NBA history who you could truly say that about with no reservations. Because at the peak of LeBron's powers, he wasn't the greatest 3-point shooter. He's had some really good 3-point shooting seasons, and I think he's pretty good at it now. But that was a weakness occasionally for him. So Jokic, yeah, he's reached this maximum offensive level that I truly don't think there's anywhere else for him to go. So now that he's got all the accolades and the numbers and stuff, it really is just about stacking championships. Before Wally came out here and gave us a nice guest appearance, that's what I was going to say. I think typically players that reach this level, and really the only guys who have gotten anywhere near what Jokic is doing statistically, are guys like Michael Jordan and LeBron James and maybe Magic Johnson. Those guys all have multiple championships. And I think it's a lot harder to win titles now than it was in just about, well, I'm going to say it. It's harder now than any previous era. So he's got a bit more of a climb to do than some of those other legends. But history tells us he'll probably get at least one more at some point.
And this season is probably his best so far, which is pretty crazy to say, comparing, to the all-time seasons he's already had. And people will tell you that that's because he's playing the most minutes of his career, which could be a fair point. But then I saw this tweet from this guy called Andrew, who mentioned that he is actually averaging 24 points, 10.5 rebounds, almost 9 assists, and 1.5 steals while shooting 58% from the field and 45% from the 3-point line in the first 3 quarters of games this season. The Nuggets actually, congrats on this tweet, by the way, it's an amazing one. The Nuggets actually this season, and I think that's probably in the past 2 months, 6 weeks or so, have blown out a lot of teams. And this is what helped Joker preserve his body and play basically 34 minutes per game in the past month. But this is just insanity. 8.5 assists in 3 quarters per game.
Yeah. I should have looked this up too, but of those 11 fourth quarters he missed, I think a lot of them have come recently. And in a lot of those recent games, he's gotten a triple-double before the fourth quarter starts. He really is doing stuff now that we must have become numb to, because if anybody else was doing this, I mean, it would just be a massive story. And for him, it's just like, it's an incremental improvement over what he's already done. And not to jump the gun, I don't know if you wanted to talk about this later. Like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander really has been phenomenal this season. And I mean, I think the literal definition of most valuable player does not apply to him, but I also think that his MVP case within the confines of this season is not crazy. Like, for example, I think he has a better case than Embiid did the year that he won it.
I agree.
So there's a world, and right now it seems like a likely world based on like betting odds and stuff. There's a world in which a guy averages a 30-point triple-double with a true shooting percentage that's like 8 or 9 points above league average. It's the greatest statistical season of all time, and he might not win MVP. It's just crazy.
So what do you think at the end will determine who will win this, I guess, two-man race? Is it fair to call it a two-man race? Is there like a Giannis case to be made?
I think Giannis might have his fate might have been sealed this week. I don't know if you saw the report that said he's going to be out through the All-Star break.
That's true. Yeah.
And I don't know how many games they have between now and then, and how close he is to the threshold that he's got to hit. But it's going to be close. And if he does sort of storm his way back into the race, I think at most he's probably going to have like 68 or 69 appearances. And if they're comparing that to SGA with like 80 and Jokic with, I don't know, say low 70s, I think that might knock Giannis out. He's probably the only guy that could prevent it from being a two-man race. So, yeah, I think it is probably essentially just between Jokic and SGA. What I think, two things I think will ultimately decide it. Three, I guess. One is voter fatigue. I think we just have to acknowledge that that's part of the conversation. I saw somebody say if it wasn't for two free throw merchants, Jokic would be going for 5 MVPs in a row right now. That's kind of funny, but there's also a hint of truth to it. Like, I think the voters are hesitant. Like, they were hesitant to give him 3 in a row. Some of them came right out and said, I didn't want to set that historical precedent and give this guy 3 in a row, even though he deserved it. And I think a lot of people will probably, at least in the back of their minds, think the same thing. I don't want to give him 4 out of 5 years, even though he deserves it. I don't know why voters are trying to change, like, dictate what NBA history should be. So voter fatigue. The other one I think is record. And unless something crazy happens in OKC, they're going to have way more wins than Denver. They're almost certainly going to clear 60. And that's a big deal. And then if I had to say one more thing, and I think this is maybe the strongest part of SGA's case. And it's kind of odd coming from me because I'm such a numbers guy. I'm such a statistical guy. There's just something about, like, I never expect there to be any hint of a letdown from SGA. Every single game, you know exactly what you're going to get from him. He is like a metronome of production and effort. And I think that Thunder team follows him in that regard. Like, they play so hard every single game and they kill people because of it. And Jokic is basically a metronome of numbers too. You don't get to the averages he does without incredible consistency. But there are games where he looks like he just doesn't care on defense. And I think his team follows him too. And so it's almost a testament to how good he is that he can just be checked out for multiple games. We've seen a couple stretches of it this season and he can still do what he does. But there is sort of that unmeasurable quality with SGA. Just, I think he might be between the two, he's the more consistent, like, I'm giving 100% every time I play guy.
I would never, I mean, I'm not in that position, but even if I were, I would never ask Joker if he is like pissed off at something around the team. So this is why he's doing it. But you know what? Maybe one day we'll see his memoirs where he will mention, like, yeah, I really didn't like this and that, and those were my pouting games. It's just when somebody is so incredibly consistent for such a long time, you just have to think there's something else, besides not being willing to give it all in a particular game.
That's true. And if it is like some external motivator that ticked him off, I'm not sure that would necessarily get him off the hook either.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. And so the other thing about those lulls or whatever you want to call them that he goes through in the regular season, like he's obviously not plagued by that in the playoffs. We always get like the full-blown Jokic experience then, but as many people have said over and over and over, regular season, the MVP is obviously a regular season award. And while I personally think that Jokic is definitionally the most valuable player in the NBA, pretty clearly, I don't have a huge issue with other people voting for SGA right now, which is probably the only time I could say that since he started winning MVPs. From the start of his first MVP season through the end of last season, to me, it seemed like almost insane that you would vote for anybody else. But this year is the first time that I think, okay, he's got a real case.
You know my stat I made for the tracking of MVPs called the Miro stat, and honestly, Shea is leading in that as well, and it's a really crazy combination of first huge number of wins, then huge net rating while he's on the court. I mean, the OKC is just a great team, but then his per minute production is actually crazy, even though the basic numbers are not nearly as impressive as Joker's are. For some reason, his efficiency, and he is a good free throw shooter as well, and that lifts your true shooting percentage by a mile. It's just like the advanced stats love him, and it's fair game. Like I cannot penetrate that case the way I was able to do with Joel Embiid's case 2 years ago. That was a mockery, but yeah, it was.
One more thing I'll say about that. Joel Embiid was spectacular that season, and in just about any other era of NBA basketball, that would have been a runaway MVP campaign.
Yeah.
But he just happens to be playing at the same time as probably the best center we've ever seen. And I think the more years Jokic stacks up like this, the harder it's going to be for people to deny that reality, that this is probably the best center we've ever seen and probably a top like 3 to 5 player ever. A lot of people are hesitant to go that far until they see multiple championships. I don't necessarily think that should be the barometer that it is. But I guess I get it. Numbers wise, no one's ever done what he's done for the last half decade. Nobody.
Yes, that is very true. It is time for us to take our first break, and after the break, we are gonna talk more macro about the Nuggets as a whole. Don't go anywhere, and because this is the time to talk about the flooring. And if you need new flooring, you do not need to look any further. So many people already enjoy Empire Today floors. Just ask them about their great experience. With Empire Today, you get shop-at-home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and price match guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring. So, of course, they have copycats, but they can't beat them on quality, service, or speed. So they use phrases like lowest price in the business. That's because they offer low quality products that Empire Today simply won't carry. Empire Today won't promise the lowest prices because anyone who does that is putting flooring in your home that they wouldn't put in theirs. Their philosophy is to help you find what you need, not overwhelm you with thousands of choices and substitutes. What they leave out of their selection is as important as what they put in. Their virtual floor designer is a great way to see how new floors will look in any space, including your house. Flooring is all Empire Today does. They live and breathe flooring, so you can be confident you're getting honest, upfront advice. They service their own warranties. If an issue does arise, just call Empire. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code DNVR. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/DNVR for details. That's empiretoday.com/DNVR. Okay, we are back. Tell me, Andy, how do you feel about the Nuggets season as a whole so far? Would you separate it into different chapters, or how would you assess these 50 games we've seen already? You are muted. Sorry.
Of course I am. I didn't want to interrupt your brilliant ad read.
Professional.
Until I failed to unmute myself. That's where the professionalism died. I was going to say, if I pulled up their schedule and looked at it, I could probably divide it into pretty handy chapters, because it does feel like there's been fairly steady ups and downs. Right now they're in an up. I was thinking today, in anticipation of recording with you, the last time that I think Jokic, MPJ, and Murray all played pretty well for a sustained stretch at the same time might have been the 23 playoffs, like up until the finals when Porter started to struggle to shoot. I honestly think this might be the first time that all three of them have been kind of at a similar level for 4 or 5 games. So that's huge. I think on balance, if we're looking at the entire 50 games, they're probably still a little bit worse than I thought they would be in terms of like record. Some of their slippage. There were just a lot of games earlier in the season where I thought, like, these guys just don't seem connected or engaged. There were, obvious examples like the Wizards loss. There was a Pelicans loss, I think, in there at some point that they definitely shouldn't have dropped. So they've had games where they're just kind of seem checked out. But if they can find whatever has motivated them these last few, I still think they are one of the very real title threats. For a big chunk of the season, I thought it was just going to be OKC, Cleveland, and Boston. And I think if I were to like organize it by tiers, maybe those 3 are still on the top tier, just because Denver has struggled with consistency. But the peak of what Denver can do, I still think they have the potential to be like the highest peak team in the league, because they got the best player in the league. And he's, like I said earlier, he's almost always, especially in the playoffs, you know what you're going to get from him. If Jamal Murray plays like he did in the 23 playoffs, they're a nightmare for anyone. And then if you add this version of Michael Porter that we've seen for the last couple weeks, then they start to look like a potential favorite to come out of the West. Like they still have a ton of talent. We've now reached a point where I'm not surprised when they have the lulls that they have, but they can win it all.
Before the season began, we've had that Calvin Booth's press conference when he said that the Nuggets have 9 real guys and the other ones I guess are not real. Yeah. And then he had this press conference right after the trade deadline where he mentioned, after the great question by Brendan Vogt, that now they have 7 starters and that there's a big drop-off after that. If you would ask me before the season how the Nuggets can win again, it's clear. Like, Jamal Murray has to be back to his 2023 playoffs level. Mm-hmm. You always count on Joker to be his amazing self. And that looked like the only possible pathway for the Nuggets to win a championship again. But then something happened with Russell Westbrook, who was almost like a drop-off from the NBA. Nobody wanted him on their team. And then he discovered that he can just feed the big beast under the basket and get easy assists and also get easy buckets from him if he just cuts hard and play the right way. Do you think there's a world where the Nuggets find, in the playoffs, mind you, the right balance between the two-man games of Russell Westbrook and Nikola Jokić and Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokić on the other side?
Yeah, I think they can. I think it will be difficult because it's I think I tend to agree with Calvin Booth that there are 7 starter level players. I'm assuming the 7th is Peyton Watson.
Yeah.
Certainly 6 with the 5 regular starters in Westbrook, and I would probably feel comfortable throwing Watson in that too. And when you have 7 guys that are good in a sport where you can only play 5, it's hard to find the balance. I remember when they benched Christian Braun a couple weeks ago. I did not like that decision, but at the same time, it's like, how do you take Westbrook out of the starting 5 right now? The way that him and Jokic have played together is pretty crazy. How quickly they took to each other and how well it works. I think ultimately the answer probably requires Westbrook to go back to the bench. I think that's ultimately probably their best look. The starting 5 that they came into the season with, I think, is the best one, in part because Westbrook can create some havoc defensively, and I love his effort that he plays with night in and night out. But I think the starting 5 that they started the season with is just so much bigger. I think I would probably lean there, and I still think theoretically Westbrook should be able to kill second unit guys, and so he makes sense to me as a reserve. Maybe the answer too is you have to kind of switch up Jokic's substitution pattern. So even if Russell Westbrook is coming off the bench, he still gets to share the floor with Jokic a little bit more than he did when he was a reserve, the first time through. So there's still some tinkering to be done, and it's not necessarily an easy thing to figure out, but I think they can strike that balance at some point, and hopefully they do.
Yeah, especially if they would probably need to play Russell Westbrook for like 24 minutes per game in the playoffs, and that would probably be the way to copy his minutes to Nikola Jokic's minutes as well, because we do understand that Russell Westbrook minutes without Joker have not been great so far. I'm not giving up on that completely. Like, there's still season to see, maybe they can figure some stuff out, especially with Jamal and Westbrook together on the court. There might be some stuff they can figure out over there as well. But the thing is, I'm pretty optimistic right now because the Nuggets are on a 6-win streak, which coincided with some pretty bad opponents. Now they are facing like a 15-game, I want to say, streak of really hard opponents. So I'm guessing we're going to learn a lot about the Nuggets, especially if they don't get healthy quickly. Because right now, last night they had 3 of their starters out of those 7. So they were already playing a guy in Julian Strawther who is not one of the 7, and he had to start there. What do you feel about Julian's season so far?
I would say on balance, I'm more encouraged about him than I was at the start of the season. He's obviously very foul prone. He gets lost on defense a decent amount. Some of his decision making on offense can make you scratch your head a little bit. But I think Denver needs a guy, and maybe more than one guy, who is just like a really quick trigger catch and fire guy from 3. And I think Porter is starting to become more of that too. Like, we've known for years that he's an excellent 3-point shooter, but I've long thought that he's a little too hesitant. Like, he should shoot way more. And he's done that recently. So maybe that'll be a nice development. But Strawther, from the moment he's entered the NBA, has this like huge confidence in his ability to be a catch and shoot guy. And it didn't translate to a ton of makes for a while. And I don't even know what he's shooting this season. I would guess high 30s. And that's, I mean, if you're shooting high 30s and you're taking them at a really high rate, that helps the offense. One of my biggest sources of concern for Denver for years now is they just do not shoot enough threes. It's cool that they dominate the paint in a way that really nobody else does. They're kind of a throwback in that way. But it can be really hard to beat good teams when you're losing the 3-point battle by like 24, 27, 30 points from game to game. So he has a ways to go in terms of like the little nuances of NBA basketball. But I do think Julian Strawther can be a quality reserve. And if he gets to like quality level by the time the playoffs start, then, if you've got 7 starter level guys and 1 quality reserve, that's pretty good for the playoffs. That's 8 guys. I mean, and typically you don't want to go much deeper than 8 or 9 in the playoffs. So I think he can get there.
My official stance on Julian right now is that he is an innings eater. They really need his minutes because they just don't have enough guys to survive, especially in games where a lot of guys are out. And I don't understand why he became the first guy who is a liability on defense that Michael Malone really loves.
Fine.
Like,
yeah.
It's a first, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm channeling my inner old Michael Malone in saying like there's no way Denver can survive minutes with him in these playoffs. He might become a better defender in the years going forward, but right now I still can see a lot of it's not lapses like he forgot or he didn't put effort. It's just like he didn't see what he was supposed to do on defense in these sequences. So yeah, I appreciate his
I would say maybe what Malone likes about him is the effort part of it. Because he does make a lot of mistakes on defense, but I don't think it's ever for lack of trying.
It's true.
And maybe eventually he'll, learn how to avoid some of the mistakes that he makes. I actually do appreciate that he you can tell he's at least trying. And sometimes trying a little too much. I think that's what leads to a lot of the fouls. But it is interesting that Malone has had such a short leash with so many guys over the years, and Strawther makes tons of mistakes and is allowed to play through them, which I guess I'll give Malone credit. I think that is probably the right way to go with most young guys. You give them an opportunity to learn from that stuff on the fly.
Yeah, I just think that Michael Malone would appreciate to have fewer young guys, so he has played through their mistakes.
Sure. Yeah,
but it is what it is. This is the roster the Nuggets are going to play with in these playoffs, and we will see what will happen. Let's take one more short break, and then I just wanted to talk quickly about Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon before we go and see the wide image of Western Conference after the trade deadline. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back. So Michael Porter is playing his best season so far, I think. He is showing a level of passing skill we've never seen before, at least not on the NBA stage. And his touch in the paint has been phenomenal. What have you seen from him so far this season?
You know what else I would add to that? I'm looking at his numbers right now as we start this discussion. On top of the touch in the paint, there's an aggression in the paint that I don't think we've seen from him in previous years. He's had a few games this year where it seems like he wants to dunk everything when he gets near the rim. And maybe that's just a product of he now trusts his body in a way that he didn't in previous years. I didn't go through anywhere near the level of health issues that he did with his multiple back surgeries. But I remember coming back from a broken femur in high school and coming back from a torn ACL in college. And there is a certain sense of hesitance after that. And now that I mentioned that, I'm thinking of one more thing. When I was in college in practice one day, I got undercut. And I was going up for a dunk, and so I fell 7, 8, 9 feet, whatever it was, straight onto my back, and I missed a few weeks with a back injury. It wasn't anything that I needed to get fixed or anything. It just needed time. But to this day, when I watch basketball at any level, when I see somebody on a fast break and I see a defender running up behind them, I'm like worried that they're going to get undercut and hurt their back freaks me out. So I still have like some residual hesitancy from that play in my mind. So I think it would be understandable for Porter to be maybe a little bit timid for a couple years after struggling the way that he did. But now he's exploding to the rim. He tries to dunk on people. He absorbs contact in a way that I don't think he did in previous years. And he really has been, I think it's probably fair to call it his best season, as you just did. I think he's like a borderline top 50 to 60 player. That's what my huge nerd index has said about him all season. He's been really, really good. And I think the most encouraging thing here recently is now he's starting to play like a real high volume 3-point shooter. And if he's a guy who's taken like 9-10 3-point attempts a game, that's huge too, especially for a team that just doesn't get much volume from other guys.
By the way, what Jamal did last night, those three quick 3-pointers in the first quarter, that was just the music to my ears. Like just let it fly, man. If you're feeling it, if you're making it, just let it fly.
Yeah.
Let's do some pre-accumulative math at the beginning of the game, and then you can go to your bread and butter and score like another 90 points from the paint.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but I was trying to figure out a way to like track it statistically, and I think I just figured it out too late. Like if I had started doing this from the start of the season, I think I could have. But it felt like Denver just got killed in the first 6 minutes of so many games. Yeah. And then they would sort of stabilize. So like their first quarter net rating, I think, is still negative, but it's not terrible. But I think if you could isolate net rating to just the first 6 minutes of games, it would be awful. And I think they could counter that if they would come out and shoot more threes like Jamal Murray did last night. Exactly what you said, kind of like preempt the math a little bit. You know you're going to lose the 3-point battle by whatever the number is. Get out ahead of it. And they have good shooters. Like Jamal Murray and Michael Porter are good shooters. Even Aaron Gordon has become kind of reliable from 3 this season. So hopefully at a certain point, they just maybe that game last night will be a wake-up call for Murray. Like, I can let him fly too, and that'd be real good for them offensively. And it's funny that I say that because they're still like top 3 or 4 on offense this season, but you still feel like there's another level for them to get to.
Yeah, it's true. It's they still find a way to get to, I don't know, 118, 120 offensive rating while not shooting threes at all. It's because they have a cheat code in the middle of the paint who can just generate whatever he wants. And they have so many wide open layups and dunks. And dunks are actually still more efficient than threes.
That's true.
And by the way, shout out to dunks and threes. That's an incredible.
It's a good one.
Resource. There's a little like subtopic that I feel a bit uncomfortable talking about, but I have to put it out. Aaron Gordon is having a tough season so far. So Jamal Murray has been getting a lot of critique for showing up for the season unprepared and working himself into the shape in live games. But for the same reason, and that was the late contract extension, Aaron Gordon also came into the season in not great shape. And so far, it cost him a lot of games missed due to injuries. Are you encouraged or discouraged by his games as of late?
I think there's both throughout the whole season for him, actually. I think the discouraging thing is obviously missing like half the games. That's not ideal. And he has an injury that seems to be nagging him to this day. Like there's plays in most of his games where he gets the ball within range of the hoop, and you think the version of Aaron Gordon that we saw 2 or 3 years ago would just explode to the rim and finish on a couple guys, and we've seen that over and over. And that doesn't really look to be there this year. He just looks maybe a half step slower and maybe a half step less explosive vertically. In the Suns game specifically, I felt like he was just determined to get to the rim, and he kept crashing into groups of 3 or 4 guys. And that slight decrease in explosiveness, I think, has cost him, at least in that regard. And if he's going to be dealing with a nagging calf injury all season, he might need to adjust a little bit, or Denver might need to adjust, or he's just not quite as dangerous as the dunker spot guy as he has been in years past. And hopefully that will resolve, but I guess that remains to be seen. What is encouraging, Aaron Gordon has had multiple seasons in his career. I remember one specifically when he was still with Orlando, where he shot the ball really well out of the gate, and then he would tail off to like his career levels, which is probably like low 30s. This season, he's still shooting over 40%. We're now over halfway through the year, and that's encouraging. And he's shot him so well that he's now hit a point where he starts his pull up in transition or whatever, and I feel fairly confident it's going to go in. So I think that's huge, and I think he's been a really good passer this season. I think he had 12 assists in a game recently, and maybe that's a way to kind of counter a slight loss in explosiveness, is to, set your teammates up a bit more than you used to. He's always been, I think, a pretty solid passer. But it's looked like he's made an even more concerted effort to do that in the last couple of weeks. And his numbers aren't going to leap off the page if you go and look at him. But I'm not sure how much more we could expect from him statistically on a team with Jokic and Murray and MPJ, and now Russell Westbrook does a lot of the stuff that Aaron Gordon used to be. So I still think the injuries and all the absences aside, when he's out there, I feel like he's filling his role fairly well, even if I can see that physically he looks a little bit different.
Aaron is playmaking more than ever. Mike Porter is playmaking more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Nikola Jokić is averaging 10.5 assists per game. But there's one guy in that starting lineup who is not passing the ball. He's just finishing everything through contact, and that's Christian Braun. He is a guy who is considered to be bagless, like he doesn't have a lot of moves, but for some reason, when he sprints to the rim, he just has the most amazing touch while being, exposed to heavy contact.
Yeah.
Did you see this from him coming into this season?
Well, I should have let you finish your question. I don't think I could have expected quite what we've seen. I knew that he would be good, and I think I was probably about as loud as anyone in the national media that Christian Braun was going to be better than KCP. I felt like the reaction to the loss of KCP was so overblown. And the reason I thought that is because I knew Christian Braun was going to be really good, and I knew he was going to look even better next to Nikola Jokić. Now, to make myself sound a little more humble, I underestimated how much taking Christian Braun from the bench to the starting five would hurt the reserves. And so I'll admit that I was wrong to a certain extent about the loss of KCP. I did not think that Braun would become he's an unbelievable finisher. There are so many times in transition, or when he's cutting through the paint in the half court, even where he gets the ball and there's still people in front of him. He just finds a way to get to the rim and finish it's really incredible. When you first started talking about him, I thought, for those of you who are listening or watching and play basketball still, next time you go to your pickup run or whatever, and you're warming up, try to run full speed from like 3/4 court, catch the ball on the move around the 3-point line, and finish a layup without slowing down. I can't think of very many players across history who can get to the rim at full speed and still have soft enough touch off the glass to finish the way that he does. It's kind of crazy. Like, usually when your momentum is carrying you that fast past the backboard, you throw it too hard off the backboard. He's got an incredible knack for putting the ball in the hoop softly, despite moving forward or up at a really fast pace. Like he really is an incredible finisher.
It is incredible hard to do it full speed. And I will tell you, I played basketball yesterday, and okay, I'm a bit older than Christian Braun and a bit overweight comparing to his physique, but man, I have to stop under the rim before I try to finish the fast break. Like that's really hard to do in that kind of speed, and that's what makes his performance this season even more great. I agree with you. He's been better than KCP last season, but yes, having one fewer real guy in the rotation also hurts. Okay, let's take our last break, and then we'll try to blaze through the Western Conference and see who got better, who got worse, especially in relation to Denver Nuggets matchup. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back. So let's address the elephant in the room. The trade deadline has passed. The Nuggets stayed pat, but the other teams had a wild couple of weeks. Let's start with the big one, the Max Christie for Markieff Morris deal. We've seen one game of the new Mavs with Anthony Davis in the lineup. He was amazing, and then he got hurt, the full AD experience. We haven't seen Luka on the Lakers yet. What are your thoughts on both of these teams, especially, regarding their potential playoff matchup with the Nuggets?
That's so funny that you use the phrase full AD experience, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Incredibly productive, a couple spectacular highlights, but he finishes the game in the locker room. And I think that's what Dallas and its fans are going to have to worry about from here on out. If he's available, I think Dallas is a really good team. I don't think they're better than they were when they had Luka Doncic. I don't know why so many people are trying to sell this as an actual win now trade for the Mavs. But I do think they could be very good. I think they could be pretty scary defensively. Because if you're starting a lineup with like either Lively or Gafford, AD and PJ Washington, it's a really big, fairly mobile front line. So I think they're going to be good. But I do think they got worse in the short term. They obviously got worse in the long term. And I think the Lakers, as crazy as it is, I mean, I guess it's over a week now. Just over a week ago, they were a team that I think was probably going to hover in or around the playing range. I know they had started playing better even before the trade, but I think that's about the kind of team they were. That's about the kind of team they've been ever since they won the championship. And that's probably the kind of team they would have been with AD as their centerpiece whenever LeBron retires. Now they feel like a bona fide title contender right now. I could see them winning it all right now. And they have one of the brightest futures in the league because they have a 25-year-old guy who's going to be an MVP candidate every single season, who's essentially good for a 30-point triple-double almost every night. He's off to one of the 5 to 10 best starts in an NBA career in NBA history.
Yeah, conservatively.
Yeah, you could probably ratchet up as high as like top 3. Yeah. When I was on a couple radio shows shortly after the trade happened, and my stock response at that time was, I think this is more likely than not going to be the worst trade in NBA history. And I would maybe back off of that slightly, just because like I said earlier in this episode, I think it's exceptionally difficult to win championships in today's NBA. And I think this trade is going to be judged in the future on which team wins championships and how many they win. And so it's probably stupid to make any kind of a definitive statement, but it at least has the potential to be the worst trade of all time. And if you think back to, the Lakers have gotten so many big name guys that they didn't draft over the course of their history, and every one of them won a title. after they came to the Lakers. Wilt Chamberlain did it. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did it. Shaquille O'Neal, Pau Gasol, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. It's like the history of the league is every 10 to 15 years, they get one of the absolute best players of all time, and they win a couple championships. It's insane that it happened the way that it did this time outside of free agency, that another team in the same conference just said, here, take our generational talent, is absurd, especially to not tell anybody else that he was on the market. In case you can't tell, I could rant and rave about this for a long time. I mean, it is truly the most shocking thing that's happened in my 15 years covering the NBA.
It's just that when you compare the official version of what happened and what Nico Harrison says and what the owner of the Mavs say and what the conspiracy theorists say, I lean the other story because it might make so much more sense than what the Mavs officials say about it.
That's another thing I've been saying. Like, I think given the fact that I'm supposed to cover the league at large, and I try to be a nice, rational person, I'm not going to come right out and say the NBA is rigged, and that it's rigged specifically for the Lakers. However, what you just said is fair. Like, the official explanation makes less sense than the conspiracy theories in this case. I still think there's a chance that it's just ignorance or incompetence or something like that. But really from the outset, I've said I don't begrudge Mavericks fans or anyone else their conspiracy theories on this, because this is a move that truly defies all logic and all explanation. So it's natural for people to look for logic and explanation beyond what they've been told. And if there is something nefarious, and again, I won't say that there is, and I'll say that I don't think that there is. I think the likeliest thing is he just made a really bad decision, Nico Harrison. And he probably at some level thought, like, he really believes the cliche defense wins championships, and he thinks that Anthony Davis does that for him. But it truly does defy logic, and it does defy explanation to give up one of the absolute best players of all time before he even hits his prime, without him asking to be moved, and to only talk to one team. There are so many dominoes here that just don't make sense, and they all lined up exactly the way they had to for this event to take place.
Yeah, and it's not like some top-notch science that nobody but experts can understand. So this is why we moved to conspiracy theories, because we don't understand what's going on. No, the clues are in the pudding. Like, we see completely crazy behavior. But let's move on to a couple of other teams I want to touch on before we leave. The Suns traded for Nick Richards and got rid of Yusuf Nurkic. I'm just kidding. We don't need to lose bet on a team that will most likely miss the plane, considering how much they hate each other right now. But the Golden State, on the other hand, got the second star in Jimmy Butler to play next to Steph Curry. Do you buy the new look Warriors?
I buy them as a tough out. I don't think I would put them on like the same level as the Thunder, and probably not the Nuggets. But I think Stephen Curry can still reach like pretty crazy takeover heights. And that was especially clear in the Olympics, when he completely took over that tournament twice. He's a guy who still commands a ton of attention outside the 3-point line. And so I think he makes a ton of sense with Jimmy Butler, who's a guy who commands a lot of attention inside the 3-point line. I I think Jimmy Butler is a pretty massive upgrade over Andrew Wiggins. And the fact that they got him without having to give up any of the young guys and many important parts of their rotation is huge. They've got a little bit of an uphill climb because they were, so far down the standings when they made the deal. But I think the West, for most of the time that I've been covering the NBA, like the first round of the West, there really are no surprises. And so if Golden State finishes 6th and they beat the 3rd place team, I would not be surprised. If they finish 7th and beat the 2nd place team, like maybe that's not even shocking. And given how young OKC is, maybe they have a chance against OKC in a first round series because of their playoff experience. And just the sheer volume of threes that Curry can get up. That one would probably surprise me a little bit. But other than that, yeah, I think they've got a chance in just about any individual series. I would be stunned if they won 4 series. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's every team can find a favorable matchup, and very few of them can find 4 of those. I agree with that. Okay, last team I want to touch on before we leave. The Clippers got Bogdan Bogdanović and Ben Simmons. They're a potential first-round matchup for the Nuggets. Do you have any thoughts on them? Did they get better?
I think they got marginally better. I think Bogdan has been this is maybe his worst season in the NBA. But I still think he's a really solid secondary playmaker, a good shooter. I think he'll be better in LA than he was in Atlanta. I think he's an upgrade over Kevin Porter Jr. pretty significantly. So I like that move a lot, actually. The Ben Simmons one, I mean, I honestly think this is one of the strangest careers in NBA history. I remember watching his games at LSU because I was so fascinated by him as a prospect. And I know there were questions about him at LSU that have kind of borne fruit here in the NBA about his effort and his commitment to teammates and stuff like that. But he just blew me away in college. And he blew me away to a certain extent the first couple of years in the NBA. And now what would surprise me at this point is for him to be like a real positive difference maker for the Clippers. I guess it depends on what role he plays for LA. Like he's probably an upgrade over Kevin Porter too. But his complete insistence on not shooting is a huge problem.
Especially if James Harden is holding the ball.
Right.
While Ben Simmons is doing what?
I don't know how those two play together, honestly. Maybe he'll find some new life as like a pick and roll partner with Harden, where he's just a finisher, but then at the same time, like he has lost so much of his explosiveness. So I don't know if that makes sense either. Like he's not the vertical athlete that's going to catch a ton of lobs these days. So I actually think it's worth a buyout minimum contract, which is I'm sure what they're going to give him, but I think he's probably just going to be a wash for them.
Yeah, he picked the wrong superstar to play with, but who knows? Maybe this summer, maybe he decides to move away from the ocean and get into the Rockies. Who knows? I would love just to see him. Yeah,
just like Rocky.
That's right. Go to Wyoming, lift big chunks of trees, slugs, and become the new version of yourself. Okay, Andy, thank you so much. Do you have something in the works you would like to promote?
Not really right now. It's just power rankings every week from me at Bleacher Report. I had to do a ton of reactions to the trade deadline. My Mark Williams Dalton Connect story is already out of date, obviously. I picked winners and losers from that trade. But yeah, right now it's just power rankings coming down the pipe every Friday morning on Bleacher Report.
Thank you so much. And that is all I've prepared for you this week, my dear listener. And please, with the cherry on top, take the word prepared very loosely. Be well, be safe, be kind to everybody. Call your mom. And until next week, PJ Dozier.